My name is Roxanne, and I am 34 years old. When I was 6, my mother told me she couldn't force herself to love me. She packed her bags, took my 3-year-old sister Natalie, and left me behind with my father. I spent decades building a life from the broken pieces she left. I became a therapist, found love, and created the stability I never had as a child. Then, 25 years later, my mother suddenly reappeared with a shocking demand. Let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if you have ever felt the sting of family betrayal that never quite heals. The earliest memories I have of my childhood are filled with the scent of my mother's perfume, the sound of my sister's giggles, and the feeling of being part of a complete family. Before everything fell apart, we lived in a modest suburban home with a small backyard where Dad had built a swing set. I remember my mother pushing Natalie and me on those swings, her laughter mingling with ours as we begged to go higher. Natalie was 3 years younger than me, with the same auburn hair and green eyes that Mom and I shared. Even at that young age, we were inseparable. I would read her bedtime stories from my picture books, making up words when I couldn't understand them. She followed me everywhere, calling me Roxy in her tiny voice that made every word sound like a song. But looking back now, I can see the signs that something was changing. By the time I turned 5, Mom had started to treat us differently. When we both asked for attention, Natalie always received it first. When we both cried, Mom rushed to comfort Natalie while telling me I was old enough to handle my emotions. I noticed how her smile seemed forced when I showed her my drawings, but would light up naturally when Natalie did the same. I was just 6 years old when my world shattered completely. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October. I remember because I had worn my new fall sweater to school that day, a purple one with a cat on it that Dad had bought me the weekend before. The school bus dropped me off at our street corner, and I ran all the way home, excited to show Mom the gold star I had received on my spelling test. When I burst through the front door, I found Mom in the living room with suitcases open on the floor. She was folding Natalie's clothes and placing them carefully inside. "Mom, what are you doing? Are we going on a trip?" I asked, my excitement building at the thought of a family vacation. The look she gave me wasn't anger or sadness. It was worse. It was nothing. Empty. Like looking at a stranger. "No, Roxanne. Natalie and I are leaving," she said, her voice flat and detached. I didn't understand. "Where are we going? When will we be back?" She continued packing as she spoke. "Not we, Roxanne. Natalie and I. You're staying here with your father." My 6-year-old mind couldn't process what she was saying. I stood there clutching my spelling test, trying to make sense of her words. "But why can't I come?" I asked, my voice small and trembling. She stopped packing then and looked at me directly. Her next words would haunt me for decades to come. "Because I can't force myself to love you the way a mother should, Roxanne. I've tried for 6 years, but I can't do it anymore. It's not fair to either of us." I began to cry, tears streaming down my face as I dropped my spelling test on the floor. "No, Mommy, please. It'll be better. It'll be good. Please don't leave me." I wrapped my arms around her legs, but she gently pushed me away. Just then, Natalie came toddling out from her bedroom, dragging her favorite stuffed bunny behind her. "Roxy sad?" she asked, looking up at me with innocent confusion. Mom picked Natalie up and held her close. "Yes, but she'll be okay. Say goodbye to your sister Natalie. We're going on an adventure." Natalie waved her tiny hand at me. "Bye-bye, Roxy." I collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably as Mom finished packing. I begged and pleaded, promised to be better, quieter, smarter, anything she wanted. But nothing changed the cold determination in her eyes. An hour later, a car I didn't recognize pulled up outside. Mom carried Natalie out along with their suitcases. She didn't look back as they drove away, leaving me alone in an empty house. I sat by the window for hours, waiting for Dad to come home from work. When he finally arrived, he found me curled up on the living room floor, having cried myself to sleep. "Dad, Mom took Natalie and left," I said as soon as he woke me. "She said she doesn't love me." The color drained from his face. He picked me up and held me tight, his whole body shaking. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Where did they go? I don't know. She said they're not coming back." Dad immediately called Mom's friends, her sister, anyone who might know where she had gone. He called the police, but they explained that since Natalie was her child and there was no custody agreement, technically, she hadn't broken any laws. They called it a family matter. That night, Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, but neither of us could eat. He tucked me into bed and promised everything would be okay, but I could hear him crying in his bedroom after he thought I was asleep. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong. Why couldn't my own mother love me? What was so wrong with me that she would take my sister but leave me behind? These questions would follow me like shadows for years to come. The weeks following Mom's departure were a blur of confusion and pain. Dad had to rearrange his entire work schedule to take care of me. He was an architect at a firm downtown, and his boss was understanding enough to let him work from home 3 days a week. The other 2 days, I would go to our neighbor Amanda's house after school. Amanda was a kind woman in her 50s who lived 2 doors down. She had grown children who had already moved away, and she seemed happy to have a child around the house again. She would bake cookies with me and help me with my homework while Dad was at work. She never asked too many questions about Mom, which I appreciated because I didn't have any answers. My performance in school began to suffer. I went from being a student who easily earned gold stars to one who couldn't focus long enough to complete simple assignments. My first grade teacher called Dad in for a conference about my declining academic performance and emotional withdrawal. The other children weren't always kind. Word had spread that my mother had left, and kids can be cruel without even realizing it. "My mom says your mom left because you must have been really bad," one girl told me during recess. "I don't want to play with you in case whatever made your mom leave is catching." Dad enrolled me in therapy when I was 8 years old. Dr. Winters was a gentle woman with silver-streaked hair who had a small office filled with toys and books. She helped me understand that my mother's leaving wasn't my fault, but the knowledge didn't ease the pain. My birthday parties became a source of anxiety rather than joy. Dad would try his best hanging streamers and baking lopsided cakes, but I couldn't help noticing the absence of Mom and Natalie. Other kids had both parents at their parties. I had one and an emptiness that no amount of presents could fill. Dad never spoke badly about Mom, which I now recognize as a tremendous act of restraint and maturity. He would simply say, "Your mother has her own struggles that have nothing to do with you, Roxanne. Some people aren't ready to be parents even after they have children." As I grew older, I became fiercely independent. I learned to cook simple meals, do my own laundry, and get myself ready for school while Dad was getting ready for work. I wanted to show him that I wasn't a burden, that keeping me hadn't been a mistake. Every day after school, I would check the mail, hoping for a letter, a card, anything from Mom or Natalie. Nothing ever came. No birthday cards, no Christmas greetings, not even a note to let us know they were okay. It was as though they had vanished from the earth, leaving no trace behind. Dad tried to find them, hiring a private investigator when I was 9, but Mom had covered her tracks well. The investigator believed she might have left the state, possibly even the country, but he couldn't say for certain. Despite Dad's reassurances, I couldn't help feeling that I must be fundamentally unlovable. Why else would a mother abandon her child? I became determined to prove my worth through achievement. If I couldn't be loved simply for existing, perhaps I could earn love through accomplishment. On my 10th birthday, I started a tradition that I would continue for many years. I wrote a letter to Natalie telling her about my life, what I was learning in school, and how much I missed her. I would seal each letter in an envelope, write her name on it, and store it in a special box under my bed. I knew she would probably never read them, but it gave me comfort to imagine that someday she might. Year after year, the box filled with undelivered pieces of my heart, each envelope containing memories and love for a sister who was growing up somewhere without me not knowing. I thought of her every single day. By the time I entered middle school, the raw wound of Mom's abandonment had formed a hard scar. I had learned to answer the inevitable questions about my family with practiced responses that revealed nothing of the pain beneath. "My mom lives out of state," I would say with a casual shrug, as if it were the most normal thing in the world to have a mother who chose not to raise you. At 14, I experienced my first serious bout with depression. It came on gradually, like a fog rolling in, until I could no longer see clearly. I lost interest in activities I had once enjoyed. I stopped raising my hand in class. I picked at my food during meals. Dad noticed, of course. He always noticed when something was wrong, even when I tried to hide it. He took me back to Dr. Winters, who helped me navigate the complex emotions of adolescence, compounded by abandonment issues. She gave me a journal and encouraged me to write down my feelings when they became too overwhelming to bear. That same year, Dad started dating again. Her name was Margaret, and she taught English at the local community college. She was nice enough with a quiet laugh and kind eyes, but I found myself irrationally angry whenever she came over for dinner or spent time with us on weekends. "You don't have to like Margaret," Dad told me one night after I had been particularly cold toward her. "But I need you to be respectful. I'm not trying to replace your mother." "I don't care about her," I replied, the lie burning my throat. "She can leave too. Everyone does eventually." Dad pulled me into a hug, then his voice steady. "Not everyone, Roxy. Not me. Never me." As I moved through high school, I poured myself into academics. If I kept my mind busy with calculus problems and literary analysis, I had less time to dwell on the pieces of my life that were missing. I joined clubs, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and took advanced placement classes. My guidance counselor praised my ambition, not realizing it was fueled by a desperate need to prove my worth. When I was 16, I had my first serious boyfriend, Jason. He was smart and funny with a talent for drawing comics that made me laugh. For a few months, everything was wonderful. Then he missed a date because of a family emergency, and the old fears came rushing back. I became clingy, texting constantly, needing reassurance that he wasn't leaving. 2 weeks later, he broke up with me, saying I was too intense. Dad supported me through the breakup, never once saying I had pushed Jason away, though we both knew it was true. Instead, he made my favorite dinner and sat with me while I cried, not about losing Jason specifically, but about the pattern I feared would follow me forever. As senior year approached, I began the college application process. Though I received acceptance letters from schools across the country, including some with prestigious psychology programs, I chose the state university just 30 minutes from home. I told Dad it was because of the scholarship they offered, but the truth was I couldn't bear the thought of being far from him, the one person who had never left me. My high school graduation was bittersweet. I graduated as valedictorian, giving a speech about perseverance and finding strength in adversity that earned me a standing ovation. But as I looked out at the audience from the podium, I couldn't help noticing the empty seats where a mother and sister might have sat cheering me on. That summer, while helping Dad clean out the attic, I found an old address book. Flipping through it, I discovered Mom's sister's contact information. On impulse, I reached out to her, hoping she might know where Mom and Natalie were. A week later, I received a brief email. All it said was that they had moved to Oregon years ago, and as far as she knew, they were still there. She hadn't been in contact with them for years either. I spent hours searching online looking for any trace of them in Oregon. I found nothing conclusive, just a few people with similar names who weren't them. In the end, I closed my laptop and decided that if they wanted to be found, they would have reached out long ago. Throughout these years, I developed deep friendships with a small group of people who became my chosen family. My best friend Sarah had been by my side since 9th grade. Her home had always been open to me, her parents treating me like a second daughter. There was also Marcus and Layla, friends who never questioned why certain topics made me uncomfortable and who stood by me through every emotional storm. Just before I left for college, Dad had a health scare. He collapsed at work and was hospitalized for 3 days. The doctors diagnosed him with exhaustion and high blood pressure, prescribing rest and medication. The incident forced me to confront the reality that the one person who had always been my rock was mortal. The thought of losing him terrified me more than anything else. College was a fresh start in many ways. I majored in psychology, fascinated by the human mind and particularly by the lasting effects of childhood trauma. My own experiences had left me with a deep desire to understand why people behave the way they do, especially parents toward their children. In my sophomore year, I met James in an abnormal psychology class. He was studying to become a social worker, driven by his own childhood growing up in foster care. We bonded over our shared experiences of family disruption, though his had been due to his parents' death in a car accident, rather than abandonment. There was something solid about James, a steadiness I hadn't found in anyone else besides my father. When I told him about my mother leaving, he didn't offer empty platitudes or awkward sympathy. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions and really listened to my answers. James is different, I told my dad during a weekend visit home. He doesn't make me feel broken. Dad smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. That's because you're not broken, Roxy. You're resilient. When I graduated with honors, Dad sat in the front row clapping until his hands were red. I'd never seen him look so proud. He had worked extra hours and taken on additional projects to help pay for my education despite my scholarships. His sacrifice and unwavering support had made my success possible. After graduation, I was offered a position at a community mental health center, working specifically with children from disrupted homes. The work was challenging but deeply fulfilling. I saw myself in many of the children I counseled, their eyes holding the same questions mine had. Why didn't they want me? What did I do wrong? In my therapy sessions, I could tell them with complete honesty that it wasn't their fault that parents who leave are dealing with their own unresolved issues. I could see in their expressions that coming from me, someone who had lived through abandonment and built a meaningful life anyway, the message carried special weight. Within 3 years, I had gained enough experience and additional certification to open my own small therapy practice, specializing in abandonment issues and family trauma. I rented a cozy office space with soft lighting and comfortable furniture, creating the safe environment I wished I'd had access to as a child. James proposed on my 28th birthday. We were hiking to a waterfall, one of our favorite weekend activities, when he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. Despite my joy, a familiar fear crept in. What if he changed his mind? What if he left? James sensed my hesitation and took my hands in his. Roxanne, he said, I know what you're thinking, and I want you to know that I choose you today. I'll choose you tomorrow, and I'll keep choosing you every day for the rest of our lives. I can't promise we'll never have problems, but I can promise I'll never walk away from them or from you. We were married the following spring in a small ceremony with Dad as my escort down the aisle. He had recently started using a cane due to early signs of Parkinson's disease, but he insisted on walking me the full length of the aisle without assistance. The pride in his eyes as he placed my hand in James made all the years of pain seem worth it for that single moment of pure joy. James and I bought our first home that same year, a charming craftsman with a yard big enough for the garden I had always wanted to plant. Creating a stable, beautiful environment became my passion. Each room was thoughtfully decorated to feel warm and welcoming, the opposite of the emotional coldness I had grown up with after Mom left. The question of having children was a complicated one for us. James was eager to start a family, but I was terrified of unknowingly carrying whatever flaw had made my mother unable to love me. What if I had children and discovered I was like her? What if I couldn't love them properly? I spent a year in intensive therapy working through these fears before we decided to try. Unfortunately, we discovered fertility issues that made conception difficult. After 2 years of treatments and disappointments, we decided to become foster parents instead, opening our home to children who needed stability and love, even if temporary. My professional life flourished alongside my personal growth. I published articles in psychology journals about the long-term effects of parental abandonment. I was invited to speak at conferences and universities. In a strange way, the wound that had nearly broken me as a child had become the foundation of a career dedicated to helping others heal from similar experiences. Through it all, Dad remained my biggest supporter. Though his health was gradually declining, his spirit remained strong. When he was diagnosed with early Parkinson's at 58, I insisted he move closer to us. We helped him find a small, manageable apartment just 10 minutes from our home where James and I could check on him regularly. We created new holiday traditions that helped heal old wounds. Instead of dwelling on who was missing from our table, we focused on who was present. Each Thanksgiving, we invited friends who had nowhere else to go. Each Christmas, we volunteered at shelters before opening our own gifts. We built a family not from blood, but from choice and love. I had built a good life, a life I was proud of. I had a loving husband, a fulfilling career, a beautiful home, and a father who had shown me what unconditional love truly meant. I had worked through much of my abandonment trauma in therapy, though certain triggers could still send me spiraling back to that 6-year-old girl watching her mother drive away. I believed I had made peace with my past, or at least as much peace as possible without closure. I had stopped waiting for apologies that would never come, or explanations that could never satisfy. I had stopped checking for letters that would never arrive. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, 25 years after she had walked out of my life, my mother called. It was just after 9 in the morning. I was in my home office preparing notes for an afternoon therapy session when my phone rang with an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but I was expecting a call from a colleague about a joint research project, so I answered. "Hello, this is Dr. Roxanne Carter," I said using my professional voice. There was a pause, then a woman spoke. "Roxanne, is that really you?" Something about the voice sent a chill through my entire body. It was older, raspier than I remembered, but unmistakable. I hadn't heard it in 25 years, but my body recognized it instantly. "Mom," I whispered, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Yes, it's Elizabeth," she said, as if we had spoken last week instead of 2.5 decades ago. "You sound so grown up." And a doctor, too. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up and my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. The room seemed to tilt sideways and I had to grip my desk to steady myself. "Are you still there?" she asked, her tone surprisingly casual. "Yes," I managed to say. "I'm here. How did you get this number?" "Your practice website," she replied. "I saw your picture online. You look so much like me now." The normalcy of her tone was surreal, as if she were a distant aunt calling to catch up, not a mother who had abandoned me with the words, "I can't force myself to love you." "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steadier now, protective anger replacing the initial shock. "I thought we could meet," she said. "I'm in town for a few days. It would be nice to catch up after all this time." "Catch up," I repeated, incredulous. "You left me when I was 6 years old. You took my sister and disappeared. And now you want to catch up?" She sighed as if I were being difficult. "The past is the past." "Roxanne, people make mistakes. I thought maybe you'd be mature enough to move forward." Every muscle in my body tensed. I wanted to scream, to hang up, to tell her exactly what her mistake had cost me. Instead, I took a deep breath. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Where are you staying?" She gave me the name of a hotel downtown and suggested meeting for coffee the following day. I said I would let her know and ended the call as quickly as possible. As soon as I hung up, I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Then I sat on the cold tile floor, hugging my knees to my chest, and called James. He came home immediately, finding me still on the bathroom floor, my body shaking with delayed shock. He held me while I cried, then helped me to the couch and made me tea. "You don't have to see her," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't owe her anything." "I know," I replied. "But there are questions I've had my entire life. And Natalie, I need to know about Natalie." I called Dr. Winters, my therapist since childhood, and scheduled an emergency session that afternoon. She helped me process my feelings and prepare for the possibility of meeting my mother. "If you decide to meet her, set firm boundaries," she advised. "Decide in advance what you're willing to discuss and what you're not. Remember that you have the power to end the conversation at any time." That evening, I talked it over with Dad. Despite everything my mother had put him through, forcing him to raise a child alone while grieving the loss of another, he remained remarkably balanced in his response. "I think you should do whatever brings you peace, Roxy," he said. "If seeing her will give you closure, then meet her. If it will only reopen old wounds, then don't. But make the decision for yourself, not for her." After a nearly sleepless night, I decided to meet her. Not for her sake, but for mine. For the 6-year-old girl who deserved answers. I texted the number she had called from, agreeing to meet at a coffee shop downtown, a public place where I could leave easily if needed. The next day, I dressed carefully in a professional outfit that made me feel confident and protected. James offered to come with me, but I decided this was something I needed to do alone. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and chose a table near the exit. My hands were trembling slightly as I waited, so I wrapped them around my coffee mug to steady them. And then she was there. She looked both exactly as I remembered and completely different. Her auburn hair, once like mine, was now streaked with gray. Her face had the same high cheekbones but was lined with wrinkles I didn't recognize. She was thinner than I remembered, almost frail, but her green eyes were unchanged, the same eyes I saw in the mirror every day. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I saw her gaze travel over my face, no doubt noting the features we shared. Then she smiled, a small, uncertain smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Roxanne," she said, reaching as if to hug me. I stiffened and remained seated. She adjusted smoothly, pulling out the chair across from me instead. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, setting her purse on the table. "You look wonderful. So successful." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. Up close, I could see that her clothes, though stylish, were worn at the edges. Her handbag was expensive but scuffed with age. After ordering her own coffee, she launched into small talk as if we were casual acquaintances. She commented on the weather, the coffee shop, the city. I sat in stunned silence, answering her questions with minimal responses, waiting for her to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Finally, when it became clear she wasn't going to address our past unless I brought it up, I interrupted her story about the hotel she was staying at. "Why did you leave me?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. She blinked, taken aback by my directness. Her smile faltered for a moment before returning, more strained than before. "It was complicated, Roxanne. I was young, overwhelmed. Your father and I were having problems. That doesn't explain why you took Natalie but left me," I pressed. "You told me you couldn't force yourself to love me. Do you have any idea what that did to a 6-year-old child?" She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I was in a bad place mentally. I shouldn't have said that. It wasn't true. I didn't believe her. The revision felt too convenient, too easy. But I had waited too long for this conversation to derail it now." "How's Natalie?" I asked instead. At this, her expression changed. For the first time, genuine emotion crossed her face, a mixture of worry and what appeared to be calculation. "She's why I'm here, actually," she said, leaning forward. "Natalie is sick. She needs surgery, an expensive one that our insurance won't fully cover." I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. "Is that why you contacted me after all these years? Because you need money?" She had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but pushed on. "Not just money, Roxanne. Family helps family. Natalie is your sister. My sister who you took away from me," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "My sister who I've wondered about every day for 25 years. Does she even know you've contacted me?" My mother looked away, confirming my suspicion. "She doesn't know about you. Does she?" I pressed. "What did you tell her about me, about Dad?" "I told her you both died in a car accident when she was little," she admitted quietly. It seemed easier than explaining. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My own sister thought I was dead, had grown up not knowing I existed, not knowing our father was alive, and would have given anything to see her. "How dare you?" I whispered, tears burning my eyes. "How dare you erase us like we never existed?" She reached across the table, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Roxanne, please. Natalie needs this surgery. It's for her kidneys. Without it, she could die. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious." "How much?" I asked, my voice hollow. $70,000, she replied without hesitation. The amount was substantial, but not impossible for me. My practice was successful, and James and I had been fortunate with investments, but the calculation in my mother's eyes made me pause. "I need time to think," I said, standing up. "This is too much to process at once." "We don't have much time," she insisted. "The surgery is scheduled for next month, and we need to pay up front." "I'll be in touch," I replied, already walking toward the door. "Send me Natalie's medical information and the hospital details." As I stepped outside, the fresh air helped clear my head. I realized my mother hadn't once apologized for leaving, hadn't asked about my life beyond my career, hadn't inquired about Dad at all. She had come back for one reason only, and it wasn't to reconnect with the daughter she had abandoned. I made it to my car before the tears came hot and angry streaming down my face as I gripped the steering wheel. After all these years, nothing had changed. I was still just a means to an end for her, not a daughter to love. The days following my mother's sudden reappearance were a blur of intense emotions and difficult conversations. That evening, I told James everything, including her request for money for Natalie's surgery. "The fact that she came to you for money rather than trying to rebuild a relationship first says everything," James said. his normally gentle eyes hard with anger on my behalf. And to tell Natalie that you and your dad were dead, that's beyond cruel. I know, I agreed. But this isn't about her. It's about Natalie. My sister has spent her life thinking I'm dead, and now she needs help that I can provide. The next day, I began investigating my sister's medical situation. I asked my mother to forward Natalie's medical records and the details of the hospital where the surgery was scheduled. Surprisingly, she complied, perhaps sensing my skepticism. I had a colleague who specialized in nephrology review the records. They confirmed that Natalie did indeed have a serious kidney condition requiring surgery. The hospital was legitimate, and the costs aligned with what my mother had quoted. What troubled me most was learning that Natalie had no idea my mother had approached me. According to the intake forms, Natalie still believed she had no living relatives besides our mother. My heart broke thinking of her facing a serious medical crisis, believing she had no family to support her. Dad and I had a long emotional conversation about the situation. Despite his Parkinson's tremors, his mind was as sharp as ever, and his moral compass remained my guide in difficult situations. She has some nerve coming back after all this time asking for money, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. But Natalie is innocent in all this. She was just a baby when your mother took her. I want to help her, I told him. But I don't want to give the money to Mom. I don't trust her. Dad nodded thoughtfully. Then don't. Find a way to help Natalie directly. A few days later, my mother called again, pressing for an answer. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop. This time, I was prepared. She was already seated when I arrived, an expectant look on her face. Have you made a decision? She asked before I had even sat down. Yes, I replied calmly. I'm willing to pay for Natalie's surgery, but I have conditions. Her relief was palpable. Of course, anything. The money goes directly to the hospital, not to you, I stated firmly. And I want to meet Natalie. Her expression changed instantly. That's not possible, she said. It would confuse her. She thinks you're dead. Then untell her that lie, I said, my voice hard. I'm not giving a penny unless I can meet my sister and confirm this is what she wants and needs. My mother tried several tactics, from anger to tears to guilt, but I remained firm. Finally, seeing she had no choice, she reluctantly agreed. Fine, she conceded. But I need to tell her myself in my own way. You have 3 days, I told her. After that, I'll find her myself. I left the meeting feeling stronger than I had in days. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my mother and set boundaries she couldn't manipulate or ignore. True to her word, though clearly unhappy about it, my mother called 3 days later to say she'd told Natalie the truth. Or at least part of it. She knows you and your father are alive, she said. She wants to talk to you. She gave me Natalie's phone number, and with trembling fingers, I made the call. I'd been waiting 25 years to make. Hello, came a woman's voice, tentative and nervous. Natalie, I said, barely able to speak through the tightness in my throat. This is Roxanne, your sister. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, then silence. For a moment I feared she'd hung up, but then she spoke. I can't believe you're real, she said, her voice thick with emotion. All my life I thought you were dead. Mom told me you and Dad died when I was 3. We're very much alive, I assured her, tears streaming down my face. Dad and I have wondered about you every day since Mom took you away. She took me away, Natalie asked, confusion clear in her voice. She told me we moved after the funeral, that there was too much sadness in our old house. I realized then that Natalie had been fed a completely different narrative about our separation. Gently, I began to tell her the truth, careful not to overwhelm her, especially given her health concerns. It was soon clear that my sister had never known she had been separated from me by choice. She had grown up believing she was an orphan, except for our mother, who she described as moody, unstable, and often absent for long periods. She never told me about you being alive, Natalie said, her voice breaking. Not even when she got sick and needed your help. Why would she lie about something so important? I don't know, I replied honestly. But what matters now is that we've found each other again. We talked for over 2 hours, filling in the blanks of our separate lives. Natalie had struggled through school, moved frequently as our mother chased jobs or relationships, and had never had the stability I'd found with Dad. Despite this, she'd become a talented artist working as a graphic designer when her health permitted. By the end of our conversation, we had agreed to meet in person. Natalie lived in Portland where she was scheduled for her surgery. I arranged to fly out the following weekend, my heart both terrified and elated at the prospect of seeing my sister after 25 years. Mom will be furious that we're meeting without her, Natalie warned before we hung up. Let her be, I replied, a new confidence in my voice. This is about us now, not her. The morning I was scheduled to fly to Portland to meet Natalie, I woke up with a sense of nervous anticipation unlike anything I'd experienced before. James drove me to the airport, squeezing my hand reassuringly as he dropped me off. Call me as soon as you've met her, he said, kissing me goodbye. And remember, no matter what happens, you have a family who loves you right here. The flight to Portland was a blur of emotions. I alternated between studying the recent photo Natalie had sent me and staring out the window trying to imagine what our reunion would be like. Would we recognize each other instantly? Would there be any trace of the bond we'd shared as children? Natalie had suggested meeting at a quiet restaurant near her apartment, a place she said had private booths where we could talk without interruption. I arrived 20 minutes early, too anxious to wait at the hotel, and requested a booth in the back. And then suddenly there she was standing at the entrance scanning the room. Though we'd exchanged photos, they hadn't prepared me for the visceral shock of seeing my baby sister as a grown woman. She had the same auburn hair as Mom and me, though she wore hers shorter. Her face was thinner than mine, her build more delicate, but her eyes, those were Dad's, eyes warm and brown. She spotted me, and for a moment we both froze, taking each other in across the crowded restaurant. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, we both moved forward. We met in the middle of the restaurant, oblivious to the other diners, and embraced for the first time in 25 years. Roxy, she whispered, using the nickname only she had ever called me, and suddenly I was 6 again, reading bedtime stories to my 3-year-old sister. I held her tightly, afraid she might disappear if I let go. She felt both familiar and strange in my arms, a ghost made flesh, a memory come to life. We made our way to the booth, neither of us able to take our eyes off the other. Up close, I could see the toll her illness had taken. Her skin had a slight yellowish tint, and dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her smile was radiant, lighting up her whole face. I can't believe you're really here, she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand, as if confirming I was real. All these years I thought I was alone except for Mom. We ordered food neither of us would eat much of, and began the impossible task of condensing 25 years into a single conversation. I told her about Dad raising me, about becoming a therapist, about meeting James. She told me about growing up with our mother's instability, about discovering art as an escape, about her kidney disease diagnosis 2 years ago. Mom never settled anywhere for long, she explained. We moved at least a dozen times before I graduated high school. She always had a new job, a new boyfriend, a new start that inevitably fell apart. Dad would have loved to raise you too, I told her. He tried so hard to find you both. A shadow crossed her face. She told me he didn't want me, that he could only handle one child after the divorce. Was that a lie too? All of it was lies, I confirmed gently. There was no divorce. She just left, taking you and leaving me. Dad never stopped looking for you, never stopped loving you. Tears filled her eyes. I had a father who wanted me all this time. I grew up thinking I wasn't wanted by anyone but her, and even her love felt conditional. I squeezed her hand, my own tears falling. You've always been wanted, Natalie. Always been loved, even when we couldn't find you. As we talked, the pieces of our mother's deception became clearer. She'd created entirely different narratives for each of us, designed to keep us separated and dependent on her. To me, she'd claimed she couldn't love me. To Natalie, she'd claimed our father hadn't wanted her. When did Mom tell you about me still being alive? I asked. Natalie looked down at her untouched salad. Only after the doctors told her how serious my condition is. She said she had found you online and that you were rich and could help with the medical bills. I felt a surge of anger at our mother using Natalie's illness as leverage, but kept my expression neutral. I don't care about the money, Natalie. I'm just glad we found each other again. Her eyes met mine, vulnerable and uncertain. Would you have wanted to know me if I wasn't sick? With absolute conviction, I replied, "I've wanted to know you every single day since Mom took you away." The money just gave her a reason to finally tell the truth. We agreed to meet the following day with her nephrologist to discuss the surgery. I assured her I would pay for everything directly to the hospital, no need for our mother to be involved financially. Before we parted, I gave her a small gift. I'd brought a silver locket containing one of the few childhood photos I had of us together. She opened it and gasped softly. "I remember this," she whispered, touching the tiny image. "I used to have dreams about a girl with braids reading me stories. That was you, wasn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. She fastened the locket around her neck, her hands trembling slightly. "Can I meet Dad?" she asked as we stood to leave. "Does he know you're here?" "He knows, and he's waiting by the phone." I told her. "He's too ill to travel easily, but he'd love to talk to you tonight if you're ready." She nodded eagerly. "I want to know him. I want to know the father I should have had all these years." We hugged again before leaving, holding each other for a long moment. As we pulled apart, Natalie looked at me with new determination in her eyes. "Mom doesn't know we met today," she confessed. "She thinks you're coming next week." She wanted to be here to supervise. I smiled at my sister's small rebellion. "This is between us." I agreed. We have 25 years to catch up on without her interference. As I walked back to my hotel, I felt lighter than I had in years. The sister I'd lost had been found. The truth, however painful, was finally being told. And though I couldn't reclaim the years we'd lost, we could build something new from here. I called Dad from my hotel room, putting him on speakerphone for a tearful three-way conversation with Natalie. Hearing his voice break as he spoke to his youngest daughter for the first time since she was a toddler was both heartbreaking and healing. "My little Natty," he said, using the nickname from her infancy. "I never stopped looking for you, never stopped loving you." "Daddy," she replied, the words sounding strange and wonderful on her adult lips. "I wish I had known you were out there." "We're together now," he assured her. "That's what matters." The next morning, I met Natalie at the hospital for her pre-surgical consultation. I spoke with her doctors, arranged for the payment, and ensured everything was set for her procedure the following week. I would stay in Portland until after her surgery, making sure she had proper care during her initial recovery. Our mother was furious when she discovered we'd met without her. She showed up at my hotel demanding to know why I'd gone behind her back. "This was never about you," I told her calmly. "It was about reconnecting with my sister who you kept from me for 25 years. "I paid for this surgery," she hissed. "You should be grateful I'm letting you see her at all." "No," I corrected her. "I'm paying for the surgery. And Natalie is a grown woman who makes her own decisions about who she sees." For the first time, I saw my mother clearly, not as the looming figure who had shaped my childhood trauma, but as a deeply flawed, manipulative woman who had damaged both her daughters in different ways. In that moment, the last of her power over me dissolved. Natalie's surgery was successful. I stayed by her bedside through her recovery, getting to know the woman my baby sister had become. We discovered shared traits. We had both inherited a tendency to speak with our hands, a particular laugh that erupted at the same moments, a love of thunderstorms and distaste for olives. As Natalie regained her strength, we made plans for her future. She had been struggling financially even before her illness, and her small apartment in Portland held nothing she couldn't leave behind. I suggested she consider moving closer to Dad and me, an idea she embraced enthusiastically. 3 months later, after her doctors cleared her for travel, Natalie moved into a small apartment just 5 minutes from my house. The day she arrived, Dad and I were waiting to help her move in. The moment she saw Dad in person, they both broke down in tears, holding each other as if making up for 25 years of missed embraces in a single hug. Our mother tried several times to reassert control, alternating between playing the victim and making threats. When she realized neither Natalie nor I would allow her manipulation anymore, she eventually returned to Oregon, claiming we'd both betrayed her after all she'd done for us. In truth, her absence was a relief. Natalie and I needed time to build our relationship without her toxic influence. We started slowly with weekly dinners and occasional shopping trips, gradually increasing our time together as our comfort grew. Within 6 months, Natalie had found work at a local design agency and was flourishing in her new environment. Her health continued to improve, and with it, her confidence and independence. She and Dad developed a special bond, making up for lost time with fishing trips and old movie marathons. We created new family traditions, the three of us, along with James, celebrating holidays and ordinary days with equal joy. The first Christmas together, we took family photos, proudly displaying them in our homes, visual proof that our family, though broken for years, had found its way back together. A year after Natalie's surgery, we hosted a family gathering at our home. Friends who had supported us through the reunion joined us in celebrating not just Natalie's recovered health, but our recovered family. Dad, though increasingly limited by his Parkinson's, beamed with pride as he watched his daughters together, the empty space in his heart finally filled. That evening, as the gathering wound down, Natalie pulled me aside to the quiet of the garden. "Do you ever think about forgiving her?" she asked. No need to specify who she meant. I considered the question carefully. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word," I replied honestly. "I understand her better now. I can see she has mental health issues she never addressed. But understanding isn't the same as forgetting." Natalie nodded. "I spent so many years trying to earn her love, thinking if I was just good enough, she'd stop leaving me with neighbors while she went off with her latest boyfriend. But now I realize it was never about me. It was always about her." "Exactly," I agreed. "We can't change her, but we can choose not to let her choices define us anymore." "And that's what we've done," Natalie said, smiling as she looked back toward the house where our family and friends laughed together. "We chose to find each other. We chose to rebuild what she broke." The journey hasn't been easy. There are still moments when the pain of those lost years catches me by surprise. Days when I mourn the childhood Natalie should have had with Dad and me. Times when I wonder how different our lives might have been if our mother had been capable of real love. But those moments no longer define me. I am not the abandoned child forever wondering why I wasn't enough. I am Roxanne Carter, therapist, wife, daughter, and sister. I am the woman who found her way back to wholeness, who helped others do the same, who recognized that family is not just about blood, but about choice. The greatest lesson I've learned through all of this is that while we cannot choose what happens to us, we can choose how we respond. We can choose to remain victims of our past, or we can choose to become architects of our future. We can choose bitterness, or we can choose to find meaning in our pain and use it to create something beautiful. My mother came back demanding money, but what she unknowingly gave me was far more valuable. She gave me back my sister. She gave me the chance to finally close the wound that had shaped my entire life, and in doing so, she gave me the final piece I needed to become whole. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship that was broken by circumstances beyond your control? How did you navigate the complex emotions of reconnection? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my journey resonated with you. Remember, it's never too late to heal old wounds and create the family you deserve, whether by blood or by choice. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find peace in your own.